The Young and the Restless spoilers. After weeks of chaos, intrigue, and deception unraveling on the glittering coast of Nice, the story has finally reached its conclusion there. Fans who once marveled at the exotic settings and the dangerous escapades that unfolded in France have grown restless, eager to see the familiar streets, the looming towers of Newman Enterprises, and the tangled lives that breathe only in Genoa City. The time abroad has been dramatic, but it has also created a sense of distance, and the soul of the show has always belonged to the relentless rivalries, forbidden romances, and bruising power struggles that define the Midwest setting. With the Nice storyline closing, it is time for the characters to come home, and as with every return to Genoa City, the ground trembles with the arrival of new secrets, returning family, and the kind of surprises that threaten to change everything. The air of anticipation is sharp and dangerous, because something, or rather, someone, is already waiting in the shadows, ready to step into the light at exactly the right moment. For Victoria, the homecoming is bittersweet. She has thrown herself headlong into a complicated romance, one that seems too entangled with ambition, secrecy, and mistrust to truly give her the safety she craves. For months, whispers have surrounded her, suggesting that Nate could be her true match, the man who might finally balance her ruthless pursuit of control with a gentler sense of intimacy. Yet for every spark of chemistry, there lingers a doubt, an unsettled question of whether Nate's loyalty is genuine or whether his ambition runs as deep as her own. Victoria is a woman who has suffered betrayal too many times to count, by her father's manipulations, by men she once loved, and by her own inability to separate her heart from her empire. As she moves back into her office, with its glass walls and the weight of her family name carved into the desk, she cannot escape the sensation that her choices in love are about to collide with something she never expected. Because whispers are growing louder, rumors becoming impossible to silence, and news spreading like wildfire, her son, Reed Hellstrom, may be on his way back. Once the sensitive boy caught between divorced parents, Reed has been gone far too long. His absence has weighed heavily on Victoria, a constant ache she tries to bury beneath her corporate triumphs and her iron will. Yet those who know her understand that motherhood has always been both her greatest strength and her deepest vulnerability. To hear that Reed is returning is enough to make her heart race with relief and fear all at once. Reed is no longer the boy who left Genoa City. He has become a man, hardened by distance, sharpened by the weight of his own experiences, and marked by the ghost of his father. The shadow of J.T. Hellstrom has always followed him, for J.T. was a man who once embodied charm and strength before spiraling into anger, obsession, and violence. Victoria cannot help but fear that the same darkness may live in her son, especially now that Reed's return is cloaked in mystery. What has he been doing all these years? Why does he reappear now, just when her life seems on the verge of shifting again? And most of all, what secrets does he carry with him? The truth is that Reed's return is no simple reunion. Beneath the surface lies a storm that could destroy everything Victoria has built. For Reed comes back not as a prodigal son seeking forgiveness or warmth, but as a figure carrying secrets so dark they threaten to shatter the fragile balance of Genoa City. He claims he is returning because he misses his family, because the pull of home has become unbearable, but those who look into his eyes will see something else. They will see a man with an agenda, one who has inherited not only his father's sharp features but also his volatile nature. Like J.T., Reed has an instinct for conflict, a restless energy that draws him into battles rather than away from them. What makes him truly dangerous is that this time, his fight is personal. He has carried knowledge across the years, truths buried in silence, revelations that could ruin lives if spoken aloud. These secrets are tied not only to his own pain but to his mother's safety, for Reed has discovered things that Victoria's enemies would kill to possess. His return is not just a homecoming, it is an act of protection, of vengeance, and perhaps even of sacrifice. He is determined to shield his mother from forces she does not yet recognize, but his methods may ignite chaos far beyond what she can control. As Reed steps into the heart of Genoa City once again, every corner of the Newman Empire begins to tremble. Victor watches with suspicion, always seeing danger in the unexpected. Nick senses the unease in his nephew, the way his presence alone carries an edge of violence waiting to erupt. Nikki, ever the matriarch, worries that Victoria will cling too tightly to her son, blind to the risks he brings with him. And Billy, with his history tangled between love and rivalry, wonders if Reed's return will push Victoria further from stability or closer to collapse. Reed himself is a contradiction, torn between the longing for family and the impulse to destroy everything around him before it can hurt him again. He carries the scars of abandonment, of being raised in the shadows of fractured relationships, and those scars fuel the reckless streak that could mirror his father's worst qualities. The question haunting everyone is whether Reed will be the man who saves his mother, or the man who drags her into ruin. For Victoria, the days ahead will be torment. She will be forced to confront not only her son's return but the man he has become. Can she embrace him with the love of a mother, or must she guard herself against the dangers he embodies? Can she separate her memories of the boy she raised from the man standing before her, sharp-edged and unpredictable? And how will her relationship with Nate, or any man, survive the tidal wave that Reed's presence promises to unleash? The stage is set in Genoa City for a collision of past and present, of love and betrayal, of loyalty and fear. As the dust settles from the chaos in Nice, the return home promises no peace. Instead, it promises battles fought within boardrooms and living rooms alike, secrets unraveling in the dead of night, and a son who may either protect his mother or destroy her. Reed Hellstrom is not just returning, he is arriving with fire in his hands, and Genoa City is about to burn. Reed's return to Genoa City was not quiet, nor was it the joyous homecoming Victoria had once imagined during sleepless nights when she thought about the son she had not seen in years. The moment he stepped into her life again, there was no mistaking the storm in his eyes, the way his embrace carried weight, longing, and unspoken words pressing against her heart. When she wrapped her arms around him, time itself seemed to fracture. On one side stood the memory of the young boy she had loved so fiercely, on the other was the hardened man who had walked back into her world carrying scars she could not yet see. He held her tightly, as though anchoring himself, as though protecting her from a truth that threatened to spill forward. Victoria could feel the heaviness of his silence, the way his body trembled with secrets, and though she yearned to ask, she was afraid of what the answers would mean. It was not only Victoria whose world shifted with Reed's arrival. Claire, who had struggled so long to carve out her place in the family, found herself face to face with the brother she had never known. The truth of their shared blood, different fathers, the same mother, was almost too strange to process. She had spent her life trying to reconcile who she was, what role she played within the tangled web of Newman loyalties, and suddenly another branch of her family stood before her, a man weathered by distance and shaped by a father's darkness. For Claire, the shock was visceral, the weight of it pressing on her chest. She had no memory of growing up alongside Reed, no childhood stories that bound them, and what she saw in his eyes was not the warmth of kinship but the guarded suspicion of someone who had learned never to trust too easily. For Reed, the revelation that he had a sister was nothing short of staggering. He had returned home prepared for battles with Victor, uneasy conversations with Nick, tense negotiations with Billy, and complicated embraces with his mother. What he had not anticipated was Claire, a sister he had never known existed, her presence rewriting everything he thought he understood about his family. At first glance, she seemed almost a mirror of Victoria's strength, composed, cautious, with eyes that concealed more than they revealed. Yet beneath that poise, Reed sensed something else, something that made his chest tighten. The connection was undeniable, but it was not tender. It was raw, fraught, a clash of wills waiting to erupt. They did not like each other, not instinctively, not in the way siblings sometimes bond instantly over the revelation of blood. Instead, there was distance between them, an invisible wall built of mistrust and differences too sharp to ignore. Reed looked at Claire and saw questions. Who was she really? What role had she played in his mother's life? And why had no one told him about her until now? Claire looked back at Reed and saw danger, a man carrying his father's shadow, with a temperament that could ignite destruction in her already fragile family. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, a storm threatening to break with every stolen glance. But as fraught as their introduction was, the true weight of Reed's return lay not in sibling rivalry but in the secrets he carried. For Reed had not returned only to reunite, nor simply to reclaim a place at his mother's side. He had come armed with knowledge, fragments of truth buried too long, revelations that burned in his chest. He had seen things, uncovered whispers, pieced together patterns that all pointed toward something sinister. And to his horror, much of it led back to Claire. Victoria, overwhelmed by joy at having her son in her arms again, was unprepared for the storm he brought with him. She wanted to believe this was simply a reunion, that Reed's embrace meant healing, forgiveness, and a fresh start. Yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw the shadow there, the turmoil that refused to be hidden. She knew that the words he was about to speak would change everything. Reed had always carried pieces of his father within him, the fire that refused to be contained, the hunger for truth even when it destroyed him. Now, that fire burned brighter than ever, and it was aimed squarely at his sister. The secrets Reed was ready to reveal were not gentle confessions but sharp daggers forged from betrayal and fear. He had come across stories that did not add up, documents that had been hidden, conversations overheard, and warnings whispered by those who feared the Newman name. In every thread, Claire's presence loomed larger. He believed she was not the innocent daughter struggling to find belonging but someone with deeper connections, perhaps even to forces that sought to manipulate or destroy the family from within. He spoke of lies, of masked intentions, of choices that Claire had made long before she came into their lives. And though his words were laced with fury, at the heart of them was a desperate plea, to protect his mother before it was too late. Victoria stood caught between two children, one son returned from exile, one daughter fighting to hold her place, and she was being asked to decide who to believe. Reed's intensity was undeniable, his conviction shook her to the core. Yet Claire's presence, her steady composure, her insistence that she had changed and was committed to family, whispered another truth entirely. Was Reed simply haunted by his father's paranoia, projecting suspicion where there was none? Or had he truly uncovered something terrible, something Victoria herself had been too blind to see? The weight of his secrets pressed against the room, suffocating, demanding judgment. Reed insisted that Claire was not what she seemed, that her motives were tangled in shadows that stretched beyond Genoa City. He claimed she carried with her not just a troubled past but dangerous alliances, ones that could unravel the Newman family from within. He warned that trusting her blindly would be the greatest mistake Victoria could ever make. And yet, even as his voice trembled with desperation, Victoria's heart resisted. She wanted so badly to believe that the daughter she had embraced was genuine, that the family she was building could survive without further fractures. The stage was set for war within her own household. Reed and Claire stood on opposite sides of a divide, blood binding them together but suspicion pulling them apart. For every secret Reed unveiled, Claire had her own defense, her own plea for understanding. For every warning he shouted, she countered with loyalty, with promises that she was no longer the girl who once betrayed them. It was a battle not of fists but of truths and lies, of a mother forced to look into the faces of her children and wonder which one carried salvation and which one carried ruin. As the days unfolded, Victoria's torment only deepened. She could not ignore the sincerity in Reed's eyes, the echo of JT's fire that made him relentless in pursuit of the truth. Yet she could not discard the daughter who had fought so hard to prove herself, who had endured her own scars in the shadow of the Newman Empire. If she believed Reed, she risked shattering Claire beyond repair. If she dismissed him, she risked leaving herself vulnerable to dangers that only her son seemed willing to face. And so Genoa City braced itself for another storm. The streets whispered of Reed's return, of secrets hidden and ready to be revealed, of a family forced to turn inward as enemies circled from the outside. The embrace between mother and son was only the beginning, a moment of tenderness masking the chaos to come. For Reed Hellstrom had come home not to mend but to expose, and his words, true or poisoned, would leave scars that could never be erased.